All right, welcome. Let's talk about seller financing today. So
Absolutely.
there's a timely topic, I believe, especially with interest rates being where they are. Some deals are not penciling out, but maybe let's start with a couple wins first. So who's got a win? Personal, business? It doesn't have to be business. It could be personal. Maybe you got engaged last week. Who knows? Maybe you got married. I don't know. Mr. Kevin, I'm going to pick on you as always.
I'm trying to think of something good. We're going to start doing a mail campaign, sending out some mailers. Got back on with Tycor Titles list of NODs, divorces, etc. So gonna start sending out some letters.
Heck yeah.
You got it, man. Without marketing, there's nothing, no business. So
Exactly.
good stuff. 2 clap. Cool. Oh, Joe is in the house. Joe Thomas from San Bernardino County, California. Who else got a win? Who wants to share something good happening in your life? Let's get some good energy going. Come on.
I'll piggyback off that. The handwritten letters that we were doing, we just had a seller call, so we'll have a listing here the next month or so. Just handwritten, first letter he got, called us, was ready to sell, wanted us to produce a cash offer for him. This was me and Katie personally, so but wanted a cash offer and then wanted to know what he could get on the market. So talked him through both, and we'll be listing in hopefully the next month.
Nice. So he chose not to go with the cash offer, chose to go to the market.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically just paint and some trim. So I told him, like, honestly, our cash offer is going to be insulting. I can throw it out to you. And he's like, yeah, just go ahead. So I tossed it out to him and I said, you're better off just getting this knocked out in the next couple of weeks and listing.
I know, man. That's why. Yeah, that's kind of what we're talking about, right? Like when we market to get investment properties, it can lead to retail business.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, it was great.
Cool. 2 clap. Mr. Joe, what's up, Joe? I see your hand raised.
Oh, I just want to share wins. You're talking about wins. I got 2 of them. All right. So first one.
You can only share one, Joe. Joe's
I
one.
can only share one? All right.
No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
The first one, I got a listing a couple weeks ago, and I was over there doing the photos the other day and getting the virtual tour done and all that stuff. And the seller asked me, he's like, I really wish you could just sell the house without even having to show it. That's what he said. I was like, okay. And it's like, okay, challenge accepted, right? And so we actually opened we put it on the MLS Monday, marketed really heavily for it, and we actually were able to get 2 offers already. One of them is from somebody who lives in the neighborhood who wanted to buy the house when he bought it. So it knows exactly what the house looks like inside and everything, and is ready to go. Felt like they missed out on it last time, and so I was able to sell the house without even doing a showing. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's one win. And then another win, I had a call come in a couple weeks ago from a guy. He seemed like really frustrated. He's like, I want to sell my whole portfolio. And so he texted me over a list of addresses. He had 3 quadruplexes and 2 single family residentials. So he asked me to give him what I thought the value was on all of them. So I worked on that. It was like Friday afternoon. I stayed late in the office, got it all done, got it over to him, and then I never heard back from him, kept calling him. Finally, I get a text message on Monday, send me the contracts. And so I sent the contracts over to him, and it looks like I'm gonna have a pretty good week.
Heck yeah.
Come on, Joe. 2 clap. That's a big one to follow, but let's see what Kadisha has.
It's not that good, but I have been going to our upline meetings, right? Every Thursday at 12. I follow what it said, and I had to be patient because I'm so impatient. But I finally got somebody who was an expired like 3 years ago. She had me rent 1 year, rent again. So she finally got annoyed and said, okay, go ahead, you can list it, and it's 780,000. So I'm happy about that. And then
it's
I'm
signed?
happy,
Signed listing?
yeah, signed, 780. So we like that. And then I found, what is it, that company, LUXVT, they'll do like all this high-end listing. It's kind of like the EXP luxury, but they'll let me pay at closing. So we like that, because I don't have the money to pay for all that up front.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that company. Yep.
Yeah, I'm gonna try them out. I'll let you guys know how it goes.
Awesome.
Good stuff. Look at that. It works when you actually implement, things work. Surprise. Too glad.
Right.
All right, cool. Anybody else before we move on to our topic? Going once, going twice.
I did a couple things, Randy. I joined a Facebook group of investors in the area that I work in, and I just posted, I'm excited to be part of this group. I'm going to be farming for motivated sellers in these counties, and let me know. I'd love to connect with you if you're interested. And I got a few replies of investors, flippers, who definitely wanted to be informed. They gave me their emails. I had a phone call with one of them, got an idea of what his buying criteria was. So yeah, they're out there. I just have to find some property now.
Yeah. So you're by putting one post, sounds like you're building your buyers list pretty easy.
Right.
That's awesome. Good stuff,
Good
man.
stuff. Yeah.
Good luck. Yeah, I got a win with one of our business partners. We sold through 2 wholesales land deals in Tennessee. Another one closing this week. So my land business is going well as well. And then I picked up a couple buyers, referrals for the traditional side in California. So things are popping on several sides. So a lot of good stuff. So if
Heck yeah.
anyone's telling you that the market is people are not wanting to buy or sell, like go look the other way. There's always opportunity out there.
Absolutely.
Cool. Too glad. All right, cool. So today's topic, we're going to continue on the creative financing or creative structure, deal structuring. Sorry, and the specific today niche is seller financing. We're going to cover subject 2 first week of May. So in our next meeting today, we want to focus in on seller financing and kind of open it up to you guys. So we have time for that as well, for questions and breakout rooms. So Eric, I'll let you kind of take over a bit because you actually got one of your good friends who was a guest here when I wasn't here. He was gracious enough to share some of his documents from some of the deals that he's working on as well. That included seller financing. That's one of your buddies. So go ahead.
Yeah, so to kind of get it started, seller financing is just going to be where you're not purchasing the property with a regular mortgage. Typically, the seller is going to be they almost act as the bank, and then you're going to have the buyer is paying whether it's an installment, and it's going to be pretty much spelled out just like a mortgage is. It's going to have payments on installments. I love seller financing. When rates go up, it's one of the best ways that you can make a deal work, because we're seeing interest rates go 7, even on commercial side, sometimes 8%. So sometimes when you're trying to pencil in those numbers, you're buying cash flowing properties, you're running these deals all the time, and you just can't find anything that works. A lot of people will just throw those to the side, but you have a motivated seller, maybe it's even a good price, but the interest rates just don't make it work. So I think this is going to be something we start to see more often. We're definitely seeing it in our market a little bit more often. So that's kind of the overview of seller financing. Do you want to add anything, Randy, on that?
Yeah, I would say obviously with seller financing, it works when they have a lot of equity, right? Ideally, the property is fully paid off, right? Because then you can really get creative and not have to bring any money to the table if you're the buyer, or if you're, an agent representing the investor buyer in this case. Then it's a beautiful thing, right? Because then you can really strike a deal where you're only putting a couple grand down maybe, and then the rest is all seller finance. And bottom line, I think the benefit always to the seller, you got to think about, why would a seller want to do that? So you have to put yourself in the seller's shoes. If you were a seller, why would you want to do a seller finance versus collecting all the cash today?
Yep.
Right. Well, I need to net more money. if I'm gonna do a seller finance deal, the seller wants to net more money in most cases. That's gonna be one of the things you gotta remember, right? Unless the property is like a dud and they've been trying to sell it forever and they're, they can't find a buyer and, one stumbles upon them and one seller financing, then of course that's like a exception to the rule. But in most cases, when I have sellers agree to do seller financing, it's because we pitch it in a way where it shows them that they're actually going to make more money total on the purchase price. And additionally, you put on the interest rate, you show them what they could make, but that interest rate, of course, can't be too high in order for the numbers to make sense for both parties. So that's something just to keep in mind, right? No equity. And what's the benefit to the seller?
And that actually just brought up, this is something we hadn't talked about before, but one of the reasons that people like to seller finance is if you have somebody who's getting out of the real estate business and they have paid off properties and they don't want it to be a tax burden, seller financing is actually great because it spreads out that tax burden over a long period of time. So instead of selling a property and having 400,000 in profit that gets taxed down, some people love seller financing because it's 22,000 a year in income and it's continuous income for them. It's consistent and it also lowers that tax burden. So that's something we hadn't talked about yet. I've had people who have actually wanted to do it because of that. They're like, I don't want to pay the capital gains on this. What can I do? And that seller financing is actually huge for being able to avoid it.
Yeah, one example I can think of, we're actually going to show PDF documents as well, but in the meantime, when I was in the flipping company that I was running, I specifically remember like we did several seller finance deals, but again, they have to fit the criteria, right? So in this one, they had a lot of equity. So we did a hybrid. We gave them X amount in actual money. So we had to borrow money from either a hard money lender, but in our case, we always borrowed private money, or we have bank lines, like a 10% interest rate or 8% interest rate, right? So we would use half of that money to buy the property and as like a down payment, right, for the seller. But then the other majority, the other half, we were able to do a seller financing with them and present them two options. So look, we can buy it, all of it right now, and you collect all the cash today, and here's our price. Or we can give you half the cash and you could be the bank for the other half, and here's how much more you're going to make. Here's how much more we can offer on a purchase price, and here's how much we can pay you in interest. And they chose the seller financing option, even though they knew, and especially they knew that we're going to rehab it and sell it in 6 months, right? So they were going to receive the money anyway within a short period of time. Yes, it's more risk for them, right, to do it, but if you structure it correctly, they're very well protected, right? So we did all the paperwork correctly. We protected them, and ultimately they made more money in 6 months when we flipped the property and sold it, and then they got the other half back now with interest. So they ended up making more money by taking that offer. But we actually presented them both options. Here, you can buy it as is, pay you off completely at this price, or pay you a little more seller financing and you get paid off in 6 months. Which one would you like, seller?
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, it works very well, but you need to know, is there equity? And actually, talking about equity, it's pretty easy, with the amount of data that we have access to. You can literally talk to your title person and be like, hey, I need a list of free and clear properties. They'll be able to give you a list of free and clear properties that you can then mail to. And then, literally from the beginning, going into that appointment, that seller financing is an option for that particular lead. That's a beautiful thing to know right from the beginning.
Yeah.
So just something to think about.
Yeah, and this is something we see, like when interest rates go up, this starts to become a more common practice. When interest rates are at 2.75%, or overall in the economy just lower, it's just easier to borrow money. It makes it an easier process. But when these interest rates start to hit 7-8%, especially back in the 80s when they were double digits, 15%, a lot of people, which I wasn't around in the 80s, so I'm just going off of what I've read, but a lot of people were doing seller financing deals. It was just a great way to structure a deal and make it work out. So this is something we see more in high interest rate environments, but it's something that can be structured when you're going into an appointment as an agent that works with investors. It's a win-win for both people. You can you can explain to them, look, you're getting interest payments on your property. So if a seller is stuck at a certain number, let's say they have to sell for 250, they're unwilling, like in their mind, they're just like, that's what it's worth to me. And to you, you're just not able to make it work, whether it's buy and hold or flip. That's where you have the discussion with them and say, okay, well, I can give you that 250, but it's going to have to be at a low interest rate and there'll be a balloon payment down the road. So, and we'll talk a little bit about that deal structure, but this is one of the best ways where if you're running into a deal, but you know it's a really solid deal and there's a hiccup with the seller, there's a roadblock. This is something to throw out there and see if it allows you to get that property. That's where we see it come into play most.
Yep. Cool. So then talk about a little bit of the structure part, and then it will start making sense when we show the PDFs, but let's hit the high points first.
Yeah, so the funny part about this is there's a million different ways to structure it, infinite ways actually. You could talk to anybody who structures it in any way. You can have, I think the one we're going to show is a 10-year balloon payment. We have another one that we can show that's amortized over 30 years and a payoff on a commercial property, which isn't super common for commercial. So the way you're going to structure it's really how your deal is going to work. You can work out whether you're paying 0% interest. You can offer to pay interest to the seller, which is going to increase their money. You can do interest only payments. So instead of paying a large portion when it's principal and interest on the mortgage payment, because you're essentially just taking out a mortgage with the seller, instead of paying interest, instead of paying principal and interest, you can make your numbers work for a certain amount of time paying interest only. Good thing for the seller with interest only is they're collecting all that money. And then at the end of the interest only, there'll be a balloon payment where they're getting their number they want. Hopefully by then the prices have appreciated and you're in a good situation. So there's a million different ways to work it. One of the most common ways I've seen it done is typically a 5 or 10-year balloon payment, 5 years, you're agreeing to pay to a certain amount. Once that 5-year reaches or 10-year, you have to refinance, provide the remaining balance to the seller. And then at that point, you're the owner of the property, they're paid off and you move forward.
Yep. Cool. So then what would be some of the cons, I guess, when it comes to seller financing for both sides, maybe?
Yeah. So for the seller, like one of the things that's going to be really tough is they're essentially becoming the bank. So the con is going to be that there's a lot of risk involved. If you are a seller and you're doing seller financing for a property, what's to say that the buyer isn't going to put a tenant in there who trashes it? You had this decent property before, now it's trashed even more, and you're taking back a property that's in rough shape. The other thing is going to be that your buyer doesn't pay. So if your buyer doesn't pay, you have to go through the foreclosure process. There's a mortgage recorded on the property with the county. So those are some of the concerns. It's almost kind of the same cons that a bank would have for owning a property. It's very similar. You're essentially in seller financing, the seller is becoming the bank, but you're able to work out your terms where it's not based off of a separate market. Some of the cons for the buyer is going to be finding people who are willing to do it. This is something that I've seen more often. It's really hard to have this conversation with the seller. You're going to become the bank. You're going to inherit some of these risks. At the same time, I'm going to be paying, yeah, you're going to be getting interest, but I'm also going to be paying probably less than I'd be paying a bank. Most sellers are going to want their money right away. So you're going to have to really educate them on this process. You're going to have to educate them how it's a win-win for everybody. And you're going to have to make sure that it fits in the situation. Like Randy said, you're going to have to make sure they have equity. You can't have somebody who took a 3.5% FHA mortgage out on it, and then a year later they're wanting to do seller financing. It's too risky. Typically, you're not going to have the equity built into the deal anyways. There's more legal paperwork involved. So you're going to want to make sure you definitely like cross your T's and dot your I's with this. So you're going to want to make sure everything is spelled out to the best of your ability to cover any scenario the same way a bank would. I know we've all probably been to closings. Closing packets there's like 3 trees involved with the closing packet. You're killing off a lot of nature to have that. It's not as much for seller financing, but there's a reason banks have that in place. They spell out every situation, what happens in that situation, prepayment penalties, and all of that. So when you're doing seller financing, you want to make sure you cover those bases. If you don't, it's going to make it for like a murky situation. It's typically going to be the seller and buyer end up just hostile towards each other. So you're going to want to make sure you do title work on it. Make sure you know what liens are on the property if you're doing seller financing. You know, they might tell you they owe 50,000 on the property, you do title search, and then there you go, you've got 7 liens totaling 500,000. You don't want to do seller financing on that. And then typically, at least in Ohio, there's prioritization on liens for mechanical and one other one have priority, and then the next is the date that it's recorded. So if you're like the 7th lien recorded, you're going to be one of the last people to get your money. So make sure title is pretty clear. And then if you buy and hold, you're going to have to refinance to get out of the balloon payment. So we all think interest rates are going to go down. Say in 5 years, interest rates hit 12%. Let's hope not. And you have to refinance that. Well, that deal that was working because you were going to hope that interest rates were going to go down might not. So you need to work that out with the seller as well.
What I would add, I guess, if you're actually acquiring a property, the title changes hands to you. So the good news there is the title company is going to do the title search on your behalf, of course. They're going to check for liens. So that shouldn't necessarily be a concern. If you're actually, what we're talking about here is buying the property. So the title trades hands. The only difference is that the seller just becomes the bank. That's it, right? They carry the note for you. That is the only difference, but there shouldn't be really too many concerns. Of course, if liens pop up, then the seller financing option might not even work because the liens are too high, right?
Yeah.
So then you're back to square one. So it would be good to pull that sooner rather than later, because I agree with Eric. A lot of people don't even realize how many liens they might have against not only the property, but also against their name, judgments, right? And then they go to sell an asset and then that judgment pops up and it's, $50,000, $60,000 on alimony payments that now they have to owe. And then boom, there goes your freaking seller financing opportunity, right?
Yeah.
So you got to be mindful of that. Let me actually show you, I think, an example of hold on a second. Okay, so you see my screen?
Yep.
All right, so I'll blow this up a bit. So this Miami River Investments is actually Eric's friend. He's the one that came in as a host. What's his name again?
Dylan.
So he was on the show before. He was gracious enough to share his documents with us. So go ahead.
Yeah, so this is going to be right here's going to be the contract that we have first. We're not going to take you guys through the next 40 minutes of speaking on just the contract, but he's purchasing 3 properties here for a total of $260,000, which is in that section 2. He's doing a $30,000 down payment. Each property is technically being purchased for $96,666. So, and then it's also going to spell out, this purchase contract is going to spell out when this loan is going to go for. So it's 115 installments. It starts April 1st, 2023, and it ends November 1st, 2032. Each payment's going to be $2,250. The great thing about this is what we we're just talking about with making it work. This is a 0% interest loan. So he is getting 0% on this. Now, if he was purchasing this property for $260 at a 7% interest rate, his payment is going to be much higher than that. And he's paying it down towards the principal. So now he's not paying towards interest. And most of your bank loans, most people should know, you're paying the majority of your interest up front. Bank wants their money before you pay down your principal. So this way, he's paying strictly to the principal. And then included going down, we have some other stuff. So no personal property included. It clearly spells out what the buyer will pay and what the seller is going to pay. And this isn't our normal purchase contract in Cincinnati. So this is actually one that he uses. And then it's just going to kind of go through our normal legalities of what we see on our contracts, what's expected from each party, making sure that loss or damage to the property is covered by the seller. It's being sold as is, where is. It's not to be assignable, who's paying what closing cost, how long they have, what happens if one backs out.
Bottom line, we're not going to go through the rest of the contract. The contract is the contract. I think what we need to point out, what you need to remember, this is really the only part that's different, right?
Yep.
That's all he needed to do is add this additional explanation. The rest is the same contract, so that he would be using regardless. So if there was no note, the rest of this contract would still imply the same way. right? So there's not much that you need to do and change to make a contract seller finance, to have a seller finance portion added to it. So.
Yeah, and it's actually 290, so I saw that 260 sticking out first. It's 290 with a down payment of 30, so he's financing the 260, so it's like there's 96.6, so it didn't add up.
And I'm guessing, you know, I don't know the details of this, but I'm guessing he would pay less if the seller did not agree to do seller financing. That would be.
Yeah. I mean, he would have had to. I think he's holding these as buy and hold. Actually, I know he is. So he would have had to, because he probably wouldn't have cash flowed if he'd have got a normal 7% interest rate.
So let's do the numbers, rough. So if his payment is $22.58 a month for 3 properties, so, of course, this doesn't include taxes and insurance, but let's see, $22.50 divided by 3, that's $750 per property that he's got a mortgage payment on, right? Because that's what it is, it's a mortgage payment. And then how much you think he's gonna pay for taxes?
Taxes are pretty cheap over there. They're probably about 100, 120, 140 bucks a month.
Okay, so let's add another 300 even for taxes and insurance per month.
Yep.
1,050, and then what do you think he can rent? I don't even know if you know what these are, but
No, actually, I'm super familiar with the area. I'm not sure of the beds, bath, and square feet on these, but I'd say in that area, I mean, we're seeing 2-bed, 1-baths that are 900 square feet renting for about 1,400. So let's assume worse and say he's only renting it for 14. So he's still cash flowing about 350 bucks with his CapEx. My assumption would be the properties are probably in relatively good shape with the purchase price in that area.
let's see. I wonder now. I'm gonna put in the address just so we see.
2250 is the rent on my one.
I'm gonna
You should move too high. I promise you.
4-bedroom, 2-bath, Eric.
Okay, yeah, so it's significantly more. I mean, 1,500 square feet. It's a multi-family though. So yeah, they have the estimate at 130. So he's getting a little bit of a deal on it, not a ton. So yeah, that's probably gonna rent. That's still probably only gonna rent for about 14, 15 where it's at.
I wonder why this is only saying 827, but that's Zillow. I don't go by Zillow anyway.
Yeah.
Got it. So he obviously did the numbers in a way where he will have cash flow from each one.
Yeah. Now, if he had a 7% interest rate on a 290 with 30,000 down, which wouldn't even be possible, he'd need 20%. So we'd be looking at $58,000 down minimum. And then you're talking about his interest payments still probably going to be more than that 2,250. So I mean, right there, it doesn't work. It's more money down, and he's going to be paying that interest. Whereas this is going towards the principal. So when he goes to pay that loan off in 2032, he's already got a good chunk of that principal paid off. And then when he goes to pay it off at the end, he can refinance out and he's got cash flowing properties.
Cool. So then let's scroll down to past the contract. We're going to have promissory note.
Yep. So promissory note is going to be pretty much a lot of what we just saw up there. Promissory note is going to be essentially the promise to pay, how much money is being financed, what properties, parcels, seller's information with the buyer's information. Promissory note in Ohio is, in most states, all states, isn't recorded. It's not public knowledge, so it's just something that both parties keep. It's just going to be stating like, this is what we're going to be purchasing. It's also going to discuss, your promissory note is going to discuss what happens in the case of a default, how to go about the foreclosure process if something does happen, prepayment penalties. It's going to be the same thing you're almost going to sign for a promissory note for a bank. So it's going to be discussing how the payments are made, when they're made, how long it takes for it to be considered a default. And if you kind of scroll down, like events of defaults right in the top, but if you scroll down, you've got prepayment. There's may be prepaid at any time without penalty. Assignment, there's no assignment on this, so he can't turn around and then sell it to somebody else where they take over these financing terms. And a lot of banks do actually have assumable loans, which is a little bit different, or at least FHA, a lot of FHA loans are assumable. So it's just going to be pretty much spelling out what we're seeing in the contract. This is the financing portion of it.
And what I find Promissory notes are pretty standard, to be honest, all across the board. They don't vary much between state to state, from my experience.
Yeah,
But I would still check, and the best place to get a copy of a promissory note, is ask your, an attorney maybe that does real estate closings. If you're an attorney state, ask an escrow company. If you're in an escrow state like we are in California, and they could white out a bunch of things and give you just a blank promissory note, because a lot of times escrow companies at least in California, they're asked to help with preparing some of these for some of our investors, right? Because like, especially like a lot of us that are investors here, you borrow money, you're kind of used to providing a promissory note and a deed of trust in California, that's what it's called, to the private lender, right? So it's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
It's the same documents, but promissory notes are pretty standard across the board. Where things are becoming different is on this document, which in California, it's called the deed of trust. Here, it's just called mortgage, or I've seen another one that said like open mortgage, Eric, right?
Yeah.
Because this is the document that gets recorded in the county where the property is at, okay?
Yep.
This is what protects the person that's providing the loan, right? Protects them with that asset, right? So then that promissory note is something you don't record. You keep that for yourself, both of you, buyer, the borrower and the bank, in this case, the seller, right? But the mortgage in this case gets recorded, and that's what protects the used to be seller, now is the bank, right? In this case, this example. Anything you want to point out on this thing?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a pretty basic mortgage. I mean, we could go through all of it, but it's gonna list the parcel IDs. It's gonna mention the purchase price and everything, and then it's gonna get recorded at our local county office. Something that's a little bit weird, or just something to keep in mind, is every state is different with how mortgages go. So in Ohio, when you're purchasing a home, you actually own your home, and then the mortgage is a lien against your property. Other states, the bank owns your home until you sell the property. So it differs per state. It's not a huge deal, but it's just something to keep in mind. In Ohio, you own the property. There's a first lien, and that is by the one holding the mortgage. But everything on this was, I mean, we can read through it. It's a bunch of legal jargon. It's a mortgage. So just discussing what the properties are, parcels, and everything spelled out.
Yeah, and I wouldn't worry too much about the wording, because you will not be the one preparing the first one. At least I wouldn't recommend you doing the first one. Get a copy of one from someone, right? Like a title company or escrow or attorney. But then once you do one, you can do them easy after that yourself, right? So make sure you get a format that you can then edit, right? But that would be my recommendation. You know, probably the first one, like, might want to outsource that to someone else. And the cool part about it is, like, I actually know, like, California, here's an example of a company. If you don't want to even prepare it yourself, just to be safe, like, there are companies out there. So in California, there's this company, Zimnoch Trustee Services. They will actually prepare the documents for us for a fee, of course, but then they will actually take over the collection part. So, for example, like on one of my land deals, we did seller financing for the buyer. We didn't necessarily need them for the document creation part, because I knew how to create a promissory note and the deed of trust for the buyer / borrower to sign, right? But I didn't want to deal with the collection part. I didn't want to be the servicer. So I don't know if you know this, but like Bank of America, in most cases, they service a lot of different loans. They're actually not the bank in most loans.
Yep.
They are what they call the servicer. And what a servicer does is the middle person of collecting the payment from the borrower and the actual bank, or in this case, it could be a fund that they borrow money from on behalf, and lend that money to the borrower, and they're literally the person in the middle. So it's not actually Bank of America's money that they're lending, right? So anyway, I don't want to get in the weeds of that, but what you need to the takeaway there is that there's always, in most cases, there's a servicer that's actually collecting the payment. So when you're making your mortgage payment, there's a high, 99% chance that person you're writing the check to, or the bank you're writing the check to, they're just servicing the loan for someone else. So
Yeah.
it's the same thing here. Zenith is a servicer. So they actually service one of my loans that I did seller financing for the buyer. And what's cool about this is that if my borrower misses payments, they're the ones that are going to send the letters, because they already know the appropriate letters to send, and they will start the foreclosure process on my behalf. Of course, there will be a fee, which is fine, because I probably would have to hire an attorney anyway, right, to go through a foreclosure process. But in this case, they will handle it for me. So it's kind of cool. Like, you can literally outsource that. So, and why this is important. If you're talking to a seller and you're the one trying to acquire a property and present this seller financing option, they will be skeptical, right? Because this is so abnormal for them, right? That something like this might actually make them feel calm about what is about to happen. If you say, look, there is a company I'm going to connect you with, you can talk to them, I'll cover the charge, but they'll prepare the documents, they'll be the ones collecting payment, right? Now, they might feel a lot more comfortable going through with your seller finance purchase option, right? Because you're bringing someone in the middle, which they're used to when they're borrowing money, maybe from Wells Fargo or Bank of America or whatever their mortgage is, right, before. So that's something to think about. Google in your state, if there's companies like this that do, what I would Google is servicing companies, seller financing servicing companies, document preparation, loan, a promissory note, or whatever, in this case, deed of trust in California, document preparation. Google those terms, and you should be able to find a company, hopefully, that's in your state that can be kind of your go-to if you want to basically outsource that to that company, and you maybe cover the fee. So I want to just show you what we use. Actually, I use this company for the collection portion.
Yeah.
And then you want to talk about this big one, like just as a, another example.
Yeah, and before we move to that one, so we had a couple questions. How is he able to negotiate 0% interest? I'd have to ask Dylan. My assumption is the price that they were wanting for the property is probably more than he wanted to pay. That's what I was kind of talking about. So the best way to go about it, if you're not willing to pay that price, is real estate typically goes up over time. So he was probably able to discuss with them, hey, I'll give you that payment. You're going to get an interest payment or a principal payment every month. So you're going to be getting that consistent pay. You're also not going to be paying a huge capital gains that spreads it out. And I mean, there's a million different ways you can kind of situate it to make them comfortable with the 0%. I also did 115 times 2250. Couldn't do it off the top of my head. He literally is paying off the property in the 10 years. So the way he did that is essentially a 10-year no interest loan where he'll pay off the entire principal of the property. His last payment will be, that's it. So he doesn't have a balloon payment on this. He doesn't have any issues. At some point, if rates went down low enough, I'm sure he could finance it. But for him, it's probably just a situation where it works out better to have 0% interest locked in, and he's always paying towards principal.
And Kevin mentioned that, yeah, hard money lenders, they outsource the loan servicing as well. So it's a very well-known concept, of course, in the lending world. But a lot of like regular sellers that maybe sell, a house once or twice in their lifetime, they might not have a clue about that, right? Yep. So we need to educate them about it and make them feel comfortable. And then Emily says, that we, there's a fee for it, right? We pay a small fee to that servicing company. So make sure you also understand what the fee structure is, because they're not doing it for free. So not only is there a setup fee, but then there is a monthly fee. So from the payment that I'm collecting, they take like $25 per month or something. But honestly, it gives me peace of mind that if there's a payment missed, I don't have to scramble, get an attorney. I could just be like, all right, well, do your thing. File for foreclosure. The legal aspects of when we can, what notices to send. So I'm giving you the green light to move forward. And I can just forget about it, not completely, but because it's annoying. However, I don't have to then scramble, right?
Yeah. So this one, we'll just go into it really quickly. This one was a 12 unit that he is purchasing. As a lot of people know, interest rates are really tough on the commercial side right now. So I actually talked to one of my commercial guys at the beginning of this week, and the discussion was, hey, you know, we're looking at properties that because of the interest rates, it just does not make sense to purchase, even if it's a few $1 million off. So that's what we're seeing with those interest rates. So this one is a 12 unit that he's purchasing for 1.5. We don't have the contract, so I don't know if he has any money down or what the terms of it are. But the important thing here that I think we should point out is it's a 3% interest rate. So you're looking at, if he goes and gets a loan for this, and I'm going to assume he probably has a down payment, but if he gets a loan for this, he's probably looking at 7.5%, 8% minimum. And he's purchasing this at a 3%. So when that seller is talking to you and he says, I need 1.5, maybe the property's worth 1.5, you have comps that support it, but you can't go get a loan and pay the 7% and cover your debt. What you do is you go to the seller and you say, that's fine, I'll give you the 1.5. You're also going to be getting interest. And then I'm sure there's probably a balloon payment on this. Yeah, first day of December 2033.
Well, this one, no, he did a 30-year amortization.
Oh, yeah. So this one he is locked in for 30 years. Yeah, so that's right. So this one he actually also pushed out for 30 years, which commercial loans are typically amortized over 30 years, but with a balloon payment that you have to refinance out of. So this works out perfectly for him because he's now got this $1.5 million property locked in at a super, super low interest rate. And it's a 30-year amortization, so he's going to be able to pay this off. At some point, if he wants to sell it, he can, if he builds the equity into it and does a forced appreciation play, or if at some point he wants to refinance. I don't know if rates in the next, I don't know, 30 years are going to get lower than 3%. It had never really happened before until COVID. So let's hope there's not another COVID that drives those rates down. But this is another thing where he's probably giving the seller what they want. They want that 1.5 million. To them, sellers get it stuck in their head that what their property's worth. He's also getting, the sellers now earning interest on it. And instead of selling that property for 1.5, let's say he owes 200,000 on it. Instead of paying a $1.3 million capital gains or having a 1031 out of it, this guy's now making, top of my head, a little bit over $72,000 a year. And he's only paying the taxes on the 72,000, and it lowers his tax burden by quite a lot. So that's how you can kind of structure it as a win. Like, hey, that's cool. You're going to make 1.2 million. Congratulations, or 1.3 if you sell it. You're also going to be paying capital gains on that, or you can 1031 into what is essentially no deals across the US right now. So you're going to be overpaying for something, or we can set this up. I'm going to pay you 3% interest. You're going to reduce your tax burden, and you're going to be getting paid on the property.
Cool. I want to show you guys an example from the other side. So this is, I was the seller and I wanted I offered seller financing on this land deal, right? So in land, when you're flipping land, it's pretty common that you want to offer seller financing because there's very few banks that will give you, provide loans on land purchases, okay? So it's very common for landowners, wholesalers to offer seller financing. So we did the same. We marketed, hey, seller financing is available, call for details, right? So we sold this property for $55,000, and we were into it for, I think, like 32,000 or so on the purchase side. So the way I made a decision with my business partner, okay, what portion of this do we are comfortable seller financing, right? And this is an example of how every situation is going to be different when you're talking to sellers. Well, because we had 30, let's make it, for simple math, because I had $30,000 out on this property of my own cash to buy this land, I was like, well, I want to recover my cash, but I'm willing to seller finance our profit, right? So that's how we made our decision that we will seller finance the difference, which actually was, if I'm looking at the numbers here, I guess we were into it for 25,000, whatever it was. What we agreed to do, just the point of the exercise is we agreed to seller finance the portion above our purchase costs, right? That was our analysis and decision making of what portion. So we seller finance 31,000, as you can see here, new encumbrance, right? Is this. So this buyer is going to be giving us signing a promissory note for $31,000. And then we walked away after costs with 19,561, which was basically paying us back for our costs. So this, I guess we must have paid, we must have bought this for like 20 or 25,000, because we bought several lots in the area. So I don't remember all the details, but that's how I made the decision. I do remember that I was talking to Peter. I was like, look, I'm willing to do a seller financing, but only for a profit of this land, right? And then we created a promissory note ourselves, right? We did simple interest. So there's another thing you got to think about. How do you want to get paid? Or how does the seller, how do you want to propose the seller financing? Because you can do a amortization that we're used to with our regular loans from the banks, where you have heavy interest on the front end and then heavy principal on the back end of the loan getting paid as years go by. But I wanted simple interest. So what I did is I found a calculator online. I figure out my own amortization schedule based on simple interest. See here, it says simple interest in the title. I plugged in my loan amount. I plugged in my interest rate. It spit out all the numbers that I needed based on when we started the loan. And then here we go. I wanted $14.4665 every month for 2 years. We agreed to do it over 2 years for him. That was what we wanted. But it broke down for him that principal is of that $1,400 payment is $1,076. Well, that was the first payment because it was partial. So that's not a good example. Let's go to the second payment. $1,291 is the principal and $155 is the interest. And as you can see here, for the rest of the 2 years, he's going to make the same exact payment of $1,446.65. The only slight adjustment will be at the end, when it's basically his last payment that will be due. So it will be a little higher. But I created this myself. I went on Google. I found a simple interest loan calculator, plugged it in, sent it to my buyer, said, hey, here's what we're willing to do. We want this much cash up front. We're willing to do a seller financing for 31 grand for 2 years at 6% simple interest. We wrote that into a promissory note after he agreed to my calculator that I sent him. And then we created a promissory note. Simple as that, right? He signed a promissory note the day of closing with my escrow company taking care of all that. And then he also signed a deed of trust, right? And this is the document that was recorded in the county, right? So this is what protects us. So in this case, if he doesn't make a payment, which he has, he's been paying us monthly on time. But if he doesn't, it's not the end of the world to me because I already recouped my purchase money, right? So everything I'm getting right now is profit. And if he doesn't necessarily pay me, then I can foreclose, put the thing on the market, and I'll make more money, right? Yeah. So that's how I made my decision. But every seller is going to be a little bit different, right? Of how they make their decision. So here I'm the bank, and that's how I made my decision. So hopefully that was helpful for some of you. And let's go into breakout rooms. We have 10 minutes left, and then we can finish up with some shares and questions. So, but maybe before we do that, any questions on anything we showed here?
We have one that says, how does that help a senior to avoid paying IRMA fees on Medicare? I'm not going to get into that just because I haven't. I haven't dealt with it. I mean, it's going to be tough, especially when you're talking about either Medicare. I mean, like Medicare itself is difficult enough to understand. So throwing seller financing into that bad boy, I am not sure.
Yeah, get some legal advice on that one.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll help probably. If I just don't know how.
Cool. All right, let's get into breakout rooms. So just if it's your first time here in breakout rooms, you're getting into into a smaller group. idea behind this to get to know each other a little bit deeper, understand, who you are, where you're from, quickly say that, but then what is it that you need? What is it that maybe you can share about this topic, but maybe you have a need, maybe you can throw out to the group, but please stick to about a minute and a half max. So everybody has the opportunity to go, and I will break you guys into rooms right now. You're going to see a pop-up right now on your screen. Please accept it and see you in a few minutes back here.
Where did you say it was at?
In Northern California, in the Six Rivers National Recreation Area between Eureka and Red. Yeah, it's really nice, right above the Trinity River.
So I remember you emailed me, Emily. Oh, I'm getting feedback. You're open to selling them with seller financing?
We are, so I'm gonna fall in the Irma bucket.
Okay.
I'm the senior who's worried about Irma, which the fee that Medicare charges people in higher income brackets.
Got it.
So if we sell it and make a big amount of, we have a lot of depreciation, accumulated depreciation in addition to growth. We built the cabins ourselves. So look at the video. We're builders.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yes,
Home renovation
that's a good, another good point to bring up, right? To learn more about some of these things, because if you're an investor and you're talking to sellers and you want to offer seller financing, these are some of the objections they might have in their mind, right? That you can not even try to overcome, because it could be a really good thing for them if you actually offer seller financing, if you understand the benefits of some of these things from a tax perspective or from Medicare perspective. Of course, you don't want to say, cover yourself and be like, look here, talk to this attorney, they can explain it. I'm not an attorney. I just know the general concepts of it, that there are benefits, and then put that on someone else that can actually explain it from a legal perspective. But for you, generally, just know at least that there is benefits. Like, that's the point you got to understand at least, so you can communicate that to the seller you're talking to and let them research it. But I wouldn't necessarily let them go research it on Google. You should then have the contact for them to contact, right? Like an attorney already, so that way you can control the communication, right? Because once they go into the Google abyss, man, like, they can come back with 5 other objections, right?
Isn't that the truth? Oh, we used to own a home renovation company. So we bought and sold lots of things, some without any money down. We've bought them, refinanced them, resold them, fix and flipped lots of properties. So I'm familiar with all of these processes. And I think that being the bank's a big win-win situation. A lot of people can't buy with the bank. So it allows us to sell homes to our tenants that we like, that we want to give. So we've helped actually lots of young families move up in the world by giving them home ownership.
That's amazing.
That is awesome.
Good job, Emily. Emily is from Hawaii. She's part of our team, but she's over in Hawaii. Any other last shares as we close it out from maybe the breakout rooms? Maybe you heard something good, or from the session in general. And Wade, sorry for moving your rooms. I just wanted to even it out. So I know I moved you from one room to the other.
You're fine, man. I'm pretty flexible.
I figured Wade wouldn't get upset.
Not at all.
Awesome. All right, so it was pretty clear. I think it is pretty straightforward. It's not as scary as maybe some people might think, right? I think the hardest part is always going to be explaining it to the seller, right? And making it seem normal to them, because it might seem normal to you now, right? Because, we're in this environment of education and real estate, but just know that 99% of the population will not have a clue what you're talking about when you tell them, like, hey, you could be the bank and sell your house to me. Like, you have to really take it in baby steps, explain it to them slowly, show documentation, have the legal team ready to talk to them. Maybe a company like that I found in California like have all these pieces in place in order to, again, control the communication so no one scares them, right? Because they talk to the wrong person and they could be like, hell no, don't ever do seller finance. That is the riskiest thing. You're gonna get burned. Or like, it could literally go that way quick, right? If they talk to the wrong person. So you want to prepare your resources, your team, so they can talk to them. Obviously, it's their choice at the end of the day who they want to talk to, but you're hoping that they talk to the team that you already have, the professionals that make them feel comfortable that seller financing is very normal. Like, oh yeah, I do these all the time, right? So that's my final word. And Emily, bro, tell them the fastest way to stop foreclosure is to put the property under contract.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. All right, guys. So see you in a couple weeks. We'll do subject 2, which is of course a hot topic right now, especially with a lot of sellers not wanting to sell because of the interest rates they have locked themselves in. And maybe they would if they knew that there's an opportunity to sell it subject to. Again, same concept. A lot of sellers don't even know that that is possible, right?
Yep.
So we'll talk about that in a couple weeks. So
Yeah, feel free to invite people too. If you know anybody
Yes.
who is wanting just any of this information, feel free to invite people.
and the
Aloha.
recording will be on YouTube. I'll put it on the YouTube channel as well of this. Later, guys.
You guys.